Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook and Dean Ashton, the former England international. We're here at Wembley and here's what's coming up on the show.
FA Cup final victories, especially as unexpected as that, don't come around every day of the week. Well, again, the official line is that Manchester United are still deciding whether to make a change. They're going to conduct an end-of-season review next week. But what we can say with certainty is they have sounded out potential replacements.
I've never seen a manager sort of almost interrogated so much after winning a cup final as Erik Ten Hag was.
I thought the quote was brilliant, wasn't it? If they don't want me, I'll go somewhere else and win. That's what I do.
We do have to question Pep Guardiola.
There's another big game comes along, another baffling selection.
And we got to mention Erling Haaland again. He's got a wretched record at Wembley. It's another big game where he's failed to fire.
I mean, it's a massive thing for Southampton to get back into the Premier League. And Russell Martin did an outstanding job.
This is a team who had a losing mentality when Russell took over. St Mary's could be quite a toxic place to go and watch football. I think recruitment's going to be key again because obviously there's a lot of players in this Southampton squad now who haven't played in the Premier League.
For Leeds United, the curse has struck again. I think it's quite damaging really for the football club itself.
Will Daniel Farke still be a part of it?
I think if they keep him, they'll get promoted next season. I think he's that important.
Initial thoughts quickly about Southampton and Leeds. I think basically Russell Martin out-tactic Daniel Farke.
He got it spot on, and he sort of went away from what we've been so used to seeing from Russell Martin, and he got it right. He nullified Leeds, who, let's be honest, were pretty disappointing for 80% of the game.
And the big talking point afterwards when you spoke to Russell Martin was his approach in the Premier League and how he's going to do it. We'll discuss it in detail, but what did he say?
He basically said that he's going to try and play the way in the Premier League they have in the Championship, which of course involves trying to dominate possession, playing their way out from the back, much like Vincent Kompany did with Burnley. And obviously Russell is hoping it will have different effects and they'll be able to stay up next season.
Indeed. We'll get into Southampton and Leeds very shortly. Leeds fans very disappointed at the end. So were Manchester City fans after the cup final. It was a weekend actually when both favourites lost the big games. Manchester United managed to come up with a tactical plan to beat Manchester City, and their fans were the ones that went home happy. A second Manchester derby in succession for a cup final, but this time with the scoreline reversed. Have you recovered, by the way? Because I should tell you that after the game, Manchester United fan Alex Crook decided to drink a whole bottle of single malt. How were you here today?
I'm feeling the effects now. The adrenaline has worn off, but you have to celebrate. FA Cup final victories, especially as unexpected as that, don't come around every day of the week.
Unexpected, but what a plan Ten Hag came up to. I felt that he was sort of leaning towards that in the Brighton game and the Newcastle game beforehand, but I didn't expect it to work as well as it did.
I mean, I was a little bit surprised. I thought Amad Diallo probably deserved to start in the way he'd played towards the end of the season. Højlund I thought was maybe unlucky as well, but clearly he had a plan to swamp the middle of the pitch with Bruno and McTominay almost dropping in to make the four midfield players, and having those two centre-backs fit, I thought, made the difference. You know, they're so good when they're together, such good players, and in the end, when they were under a bit of pressure, those two were immense.
He's still toast though, isn't he?
Well, again, the official line is that Manchester United are still deciding whether to make a change. They're going to conduct an end-of-season review next week. But what we can say with certainty is they have sounded out potential replacements. That's not that unusual. I think most clubs now have a succession plan in place, but just from the way he was answering my questions after the game, Ten Hag, and I felt like he was a little bit spiky in other interviews that he gave.
Well, I think he was actually, you know, he was quite sort of approachable in one TV interview and not so much in another, and I think that was because of the way that I think he's had to undergo a severe pressure over the course of the week, constant conversations about what he's going to do next. But I don't think it was just him that gave us the indication that it was over. The captain seemed to almost be alerted to the fact that it was probably the last rodeo.
Yeah, and I asked Lisandro Martinez live on talkSPORT, do the players want Erik Ten Hag to stay? And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, but he said we want to celebrate this, and then it's up to the owners. And this is a player that Ten Hag brought to the football club. I thought that was quite telling as well, that he chose not to come out and publicly back the manager.
Is it fair?
It doesn't seem it, no, and I think I've never seen a manager sort of almost interrogated so much after winning a cup final as Erik ten Hag was.
Louis van Gaal had a similar sort of thing, didn't he, in 2016? It has real echoes of that.
It does, but I think that's partly the club's fault because they've left him really sort of high and dry at the end of the season without coming out and saying anything. And because of the style and the pressure that he's come under and finishing in the worst position in the Premier League for Manchester United. But still, he just won a cup final. You know, I thought that he might have got a little bit of reprieve, and I think that's probably why he was quite defiant. And I think because everyone didn't feel as if Manchester United would win it, he's come out and gone, actually, there's something about me. You know, there is something about me that I'm able to produce a side that wins trophies, 2 out of the 3 finals that he's got them into. And I thought fair play.
Yeah, listen, I thought the quote was brilliant, wasn't it? If they don't want me, I'll go somewhere else and win. That's what I do. And I suppose there will be no shortage of takers.
No, we've had this conversation all season long on the podcast. I don't think I've ever actually come out and said with certainty they need to change the manager. There have been times where maybe he's lost a bit of my support. But I think actually if you look at the scenes after the game, they were very different to that Van Gaal Cup final. I think by the end of his reign, most Manchester United fans were backing a change. I think if you turn around and say, actually, we're going to keep Erik ten Hag, I don't think the majority of Manchester United supporters will protest against that.
No, I think when you speak to Manchester United fans in the build-up to the Cup final, most of them were undecided. They didn't know, a bit like you know, probably sent a few messages in WhatsApp groups that were quite stinging criticism over the course of the season, but didn't quite go the whole hog and come out and say, definitely he's got to go. And I think that was the feeling from most of them. It does mean they're qualified for the Europa League. That's a big thing for the club, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. I think in terms of recruitment, it helps massively. European football, right? It's not the Champions League, but still, it's something
a chance to get into the Champions League.
Absolutely, it is as well. And a club like Manchester United need to be in Europe. They need to have those nights. It's part of their makeup. It's what's made them such a great club and such a historic football club because of it. So that's how big that game was, and nobody expected it. It shunted Newcastle out. It's shunted Chelsea into the Europa Conference. It's had big ramifications, the fact that they were able to pull off that result.
And ramifications for Manchester City in the fact that they didn't manage to become the first team that's ever won the double-double. Largely that might be down in part to the team selection of Pep Guardiola, because another big game comes along, another baffling selection, especially at centre-half, and not including a winger on the left-hand side seems surprising to me.
Yes, and I think if we're going to praise Erik ten Hag for getting his tactics spot on, particularly in that first half, we do have to question Pep Guardiola. I was at the Etihad last weekend, and I felt like Jeremy Doku had almost played his way to a definite starting spot. He was terrific against West Ham. Not only did he not play, nor did Jack Grealish. That meant a slight positional tweak for Phil Foden, which again may have given Gareth Southgate food for thought because he wasn't as effective coming in from that left-hand side. Rodri and Kovacic in midfield seemed quite negative to me. And we got to mention Erling Haaland again. He's got a wretched record at Wembley. It's another big game where he's fouled to fire.
Yeah, 1 goal in the Champions League from quarterfinals onwards. That includes semi-finals and final. No goal in the Community Shield. No goal in the Super Cup, and no goal in either of his FA Cup finals. As a striker, what do you put that down to?
You can't say it's not because he's good enough, because he's shown that he is.
He came close. He hit the crossbar
throughout his career. I think it's more a coincidence, and also he's that important that when you get to these sort of games, the opposition make sure that he doesn't get the service. If you stop the service into him, then you are halfway there, because he has been that important to City since he's joined the football club. So. And you could see it. I mean, I don't actually think he likes aggression. Even though he's aggressive and he's big and powerful, when I've seen him against real aggression, as in genuine aggression like Martinez, I don't think he particularly actually likes that side of the game. And it's something that I think players and opposition are starting to figure out. Even Ben Mee talked about it. They talked about trying to rough him up and unsettle him. And those are the things that he'll have to work on. And he's still so young.
Because some centre forwards really do thrive off that. If you wind them up and you get into them and you cause them a bit of grief and you do ruffle them up, actually it can almost poke the bear.
I was similar in terms of I didn't like the physical side, but you're required to, because you're 6 foot plus and you're built big. They expect you to be that way, but it's a mentality being aggressive. I don't think he's necessarily has that when it's real aggression. Martinez, a Keown, that type of horrible aggression that's not nice to play against. I think he'll learn to adapt to it. You have to if he wants to do it in the biggest games. I think he has to look at himself, and even the best have to.
Interesting to hear from Pep Guardiola afterwards. He said about Onana, who actually has had a very good season, especially towards the end. I mean, he's had some moments, and he certainly had a moment in the cup final actually, because he shoveled the ball into his own net from that Doku effort, which could have been a turning point in the match, didn't end up being a game changer. But he said with Onana as the goalkeeper, Pep Guardiola, it's very difficult to press him.
Yeah, and his distribution was good, actually. It's slightly unfortunate that he's made that mistake, and I've got to say, sat behind the goal in front of the United fans, I was a nervous wreck for those last 10 minutes.
You're supposed to be professional.
I lost my professionalism a little bit.
You turned into Perry Groves.
But I was convinced that City would not only equalise, but probably go on and win 3-2 in 90 minutes, because that's just what Manchester United have done this season. But you have to praise the character of the players to come through and deny City that double-double. And I think Onana is certainly someone... He has the character to be a success at Manchester United, and he has the character to be able to box off those mistakes and still believe that he can wear that shirt. And I think next season we'll see the best of him.
Next season, who's going to be in charge? If it's not Erik Ten Hag, who are the ones that they've been sounding out?
It's a very similar list to Chelsea, barring Thomas Tuchel.
Well, they'll get top pick. Well, they would do, won't they? I mean, it's not Chelsea are not going to get top pick of the manager. If they've got the same list as Manchester United, Chelsea don't get number one pick, do they?
Why?
Because Chelsea have got Todd Bowley and Daniel Barley in charge, and they've been through 4 managers and the greatest manager in women's football history in 2 years. Why would you go there if you've been wanted by somebody else?
Because I think Chelsea's squad is more appealing.
It's Manchester United.
I know it is, but I just think managers who are coaches, more coach is now, will be looking at that young Chelsea squad and thinking, I think that's more ready to push on than a Manchester United one right now.
Interesting. So who's on that list?
Mauricio Pochettino is on that list, and clearly he's not on Chelsea's list. Kieran McKenna and Thomas Frank appear to be the 2 names that both clubs have an interest in. And Thomas Tuchel, who we know is desperate to get back to the Premier League and would take the Manchester United job tomorrow. I just wonder if Pochettino coming onto the market, maybe unexpectedly, might just tilt it in his favour and might help make up the mind when it comes to Ten Hag.
I mean, listen, I don't think it is Kieran McKenna, but certainly his PR team are putting out there that he's interested in the Manchester United job. Is that a step too far at this stage in his career?
I think the job that he's done has been unbelievable at Ipswich, but as we saw with Graham Potter, that step up from very little expectation to unbelievable, intense expectation can be too much for certain managers. I think the fact that he's already been there, probably understands it, would give him an edge, I would say, over Graham Potter who went into Chelsea. But I think they'll keep Ten Hag. I think they'll probably, that final win, the way he came out and spoke, I think that they'll look and think about the injuries and go, we've got other things that maybe are more pressing behind the scenes that we need to get right before we just change the manager.
It's a really good point, because if they do change the manager, then it's a complete rebuild again. Whereas he would argue that actually there are some building blocks that I've put in place. If Lisandro Martinez stays fit, they won't possibly concede the number of goals they did last season.
The young players coming through
will come back from the Euros, and I'm convinced he'll be on the plane, and he will benefit from that experience. I thought Marcus Rashford actually looked interested in the FA Cup final. If they can keep him motivated and get him back to his best, there's
You're
a player
damning him
there.
with faint praise there, aren't you?
He hasn't looked interested for much of the season.
No, that's true.
But it's not a terrible squad. It's not a terrible squad.
But if you look behind the scenes, Marcus Rashford's people, I don't think will be too happy if Ten Hag ends up staying. I think they think he's asked to do too much.
Well, I would suggest that Marcus Rashford needs to find new people to surround himself with.
Yeah, you're not the first person to suggest that. Right, okay, that's Manchester United and Manchester City done for now.
Can we just give me a bit of praise for my 2-1 prediction in the podcast leading up to the game? You're not going to mention that?
It's interesting you should say this, right? Because we've sort of done a deep dive into his prediction. Why did you predict it like that? What had you seen over the last couple of weeks that made you think that? Because the truth is actually, it's just a hunch. It was just a feeling, wasn't it? It was just a punt.
It's the only prediction a Manchester United fan could give. Yeah. It's the only one where they win the game.
You couldn't turn around and say, "Oh no, I think we're going to get battered."
It was more in hope than expectation,
Yeah.
I have to say. But it came right.
I did pick Alejandro Garnacho to score any time though,
Yes,
so I was
you
very
did.
happy with that.
And we both actually arrived here on Saturday morning.
Oh, yeah, we went for a little coffee, didn't we,
And
across the road?
We both had a little,
we did.
little feeling that
A little
it would
sneaky.
turn out better for Manchester United than most people expect. Jim Proudfoot and Adrian Durham laughed me out of town when I said, actually, I'm feeling strangely optimistic.
Yeah, well, there you go. Listen, the pod always gives you a little bit of insight. Premier League All Access. Soon to be Euros All Access, by the way. Remember, during the course of the tournament in Germany, Crook and I and assorted cast members will be giving you a brief update every single morning on the Euros All Access podcast. So make
You'll
sure
be there
join us for
every
that.
day?
I'll be there every day. Will you be there for it?
I'll be
Will
there
you
every
be
day.
late?
Just keep your phone on, because you got called out of bed in Qatar, didn't
Once.
It happened.
Once I missed the podcast. How many times have you been late for this one over the course of the season? Or rearranged it around your golfing experiences? Yeah, let's move on, shall we? Let's get to the Championship playoff final, where instead of the Sinners, it was the Saints that went marching on. Congratulations to Southampton Football Club, who win football's richest games. Trevor Birch and Rick Parry were telling us beforehand that they thought it was worth £200 million. Actually, Deloitte did a sort of assumption that it was only £140 million this time, because the two were due to get parachute payments anyway. But even so, I mean, it's a massive thing for Southampton to get back into the Premier League. And Russell Martin did an outstanding job.
He did. He got it absolutely right in the way that he approached the game to try and nullify Leeds, and he was under severe pressure because, you know, the previous jobs he'd played this wonderful football but got nowhere near promotion, and here was a squad more than capable of doing it, and so he had that pressure on him, and you know, I think what he was able to show was that there was a different side to his management, that he doesn't just stick to absolutely one way of playing, and he was able to put a team out with Ryan Fraser at left wing back at times. Those sort of little tweaks I thought were so important, and he got it right.
Yeah, and obviously as a striker you're probably going to accede to this point, but was the difference between the two teams actually not just the tactical abilities of the manager? I think they were stark, but the forwards. Adam Armstrong, 24 goals this season, took his goal like a sniper, and they didn't really have that sort of presence, Leeds, in the box.
No, and look, it's not as if Adam Armstrong has got the power and the pace to upset defenders. It's about his intelligence, the runs he made, and I watched Joel Perreault and he didn't do any of that. He looked stuck, he looked like he didn't have the answers to any of the issues, and Adam Armstrong kept making those little clever runs, trying to stretch the defence, and ultimately at these sort of moments it's us big stars that turn up and take the glory. That's our job.
85 minutes on the clock, there was a touch map that went up, and Joel Perreault hadn't touched the ball in the penalty area of the opposition. He did touch it towards the end of the game inside the box, but before that hadn't had a kick in there.
Well, as you know, I was sat behind the Leeds bench and I was keeping a close eye on both managers, and it just struck me throughout the course of the afternoon that in Russell Martin you had a manager who was fully invested in the game and was able to alter the course of proceedings in his team's favour. And I didn't see that from Daniel Farke, but I think you have to mention the job that Russell has done to rebuild Adam Armstrong's confidence. This was a player who went to Southampton. He was Championship Player of the Year. He scored a lot of goals for Blackburn Rovers. Didn't translate that into the Premier League. I think Ralph Hasenhüttl, by regularly dropping him from the side, battered his confidence, and Russell has rebuilt that confidence, as you saw from the finish. I think he's someone actually who may prove better in the Premier League second time around, but he's done that for the whole football club, because this is a team who had a losing mentality when Russell took over. St Mary's could be quite a toxic place to go and watch football. The dressing room was very negative, and not only did he have to rebuild their style, he had to lift the mood of a whole football club all the time, knowing that some of his best players wouldn't be there. If you remember the first game of the season that you covered against Sheffield Wednesday, he said, well, I don't know my 11 yet because somebody might be sold between now and tomorrow, and that was literally what was happening.
James Ward-Prowse played in that game and then never played for the club again after that. So
I think he's done a magnificent job.
You know, Crook got a little bit so excited about his fulsome praise of Russell Martin that he forgot to use the microphone halfway through that. You're obviously a paid-up member of the Russell Martin fan club, which is good to know ahead of next season. He is going to prove to be an interesting character, I think.
He's a very strong character. I think he's terrific in interviews because he gives you plenty. He sticks by what he really believes in. as he's already said to Crook, to come out straight away and say that I'm going to stick to these principles and show everybody that we're capable of doing it in the Premier League. Says everything about, I think, his confidence in his coaching ability, and I'm excited to see how he gets on. I am, because obviously Vincent Kompany straight into a job and done it. He has had way more experience really than Vincent Kompany had at other jobs. So it will be fascinating to see how he copes with the Premier League and the qualities that are there.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he speaks his mind. You ask him a question, he will give you the answer. I mean, even so much to the point where Rishi Sunak turns up at St Mary's and he says, well, I've got no time for the fella. He might say hello, but I might be saying hello back, which is, it's actually said, and he always says this if you speak to him. He says, well, that's what I think, so that's what I say. End of the story. He doesn't leave you guessing, and he hasn't left us guessing about the approach that he's going to take in the Premier League. Is it going to work though? I was at the Liverpool game in the FA Cup, and he played with a semi-B team in the similar style. It worked for parts of the game, but they were ultimately beaten towards the end of it. But they scored first in that match as well.
And they had enough chances to actually probably put the game out of sight before Liverpool got back in it. I think recruitment's going to be key again, because obviously there's a lot of players in this Southampton squad now who haven't played in the Premier League. There are some who played there before and didn't really look up to it. So I think it'll be interesting to see what sort of a rebuild they have. They've already made their first signing, and Manchester City did get one win at Wembley this weekend, because Taylor Harwood-Bellis is now a permanent Southampton player, and City have got £20 million as a result of a clause in his loan deal that made it an obligation for Southampton to buy him if they went up. And I think he's one player actually who might do well in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he wanted to play Premier League football at the end of last season. The idea was to try and go and do that, but no offers came in for him. When Southampton came in and said, we'll take him on loan, they stipulated that he would go permanently if they got promoted, because I think he needs to play regular football. He needs to find a home, really. 2 promotions back to back. Can he play in the Premier League on a regular basis?
Well, I think he can, because he's shown the qualities on the ball. I think it'll be a test in the Premier League when you come up against players that are athletically supreme compared to the Championship, and if you make a mistake, you are punished. But I think he's more than good enough from what I've seen to get promoted twice in the manner that he has. But I think there's a few players in that Southampton side that, whether Russ can get them up to the level, and because of the confidence that he's already built in those players, can they step up and cope much better?
Does he make them eat vegan food? Because he is a co-owner of a vegan restaurant, isn't he?
I haven't heard that he does, no. So.
I just wondered.
Maybe that's the secret.
Maybe that's the nutritional secrets to getting promoted. It's the 4th time Southampton have been promoted to the top flight. 1966, 78, 2012. This is the first time they've earned it through the playoffs. The playoffs are a massive problem for Leeds United. The curse has struck again. It's their 6th time in the playoffs. They've never, ever managed to get up via that method. And I think it's quite damaging, really, for the football club itself. This is a high-profile, well-supported club. Fans were brilliant, by the way. I thought that the Southampton fans probably were dwarfed in terms of noise by the Leeds fans over the course of the piece. But how costly is it going to be in terms of finances? I know they've got new owners in the 49ers now, but relegation last season, 2 seasons in the Championship, they won't want to spend too many more.
Yeah, I don't think they're in brilliant financial shape despite those new owners, and I think we'll see players moving on now. He was really disappointing, but I know Somerville has suitors in the Premier League. Nonto, you'd imagine, may well go as well. Again, I didn't think we saw him to the best of his capability, so it is going to be an interesting summer. Will Daniel Farke still be a part of it? I asked him directly about his own future, and he said now's not the time to talk about that, but I think there's a lot of Leeds fans who maybe will be calling for a managerial change, and it'll be interesting to see what direction they go in. The EFL will be delighted to have a club of the size of Leeds for another season.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they'll get the biggest club in the Championship by a mile. What do you think about Daniel Farke? You've watched him closely at Norwich. You've seen him operate in the Championship this season with Leeds United. I mean, he came in late, didn't he, actually, after what was a real confusing pre-season?
Yeah, and I think that probably hindered them slightly, but I think if they keep him, they'll get promoted next season. I think he's that important. I think his knowledge and the style he plays in the Championship will get them promoted if they back him and get the right players. Leeds is still such a huge football club that players want to go there. Players want to play. Ellen Road and the support that they have still is a big draw for players wanting to go and play for the football club. And if they stick with him, I think they'll get promoted. I think you don't get rid of somebody that's got you 90 points and just missed out because of a lick of paint on the crossbar. You don't. You go, actually, he's got us so close. It's just very unfortunate, but he's more than capable of going and doing it again. Yeah,
you talk about the lick of paint on the crossbar there. That was the effort from Dan James, which rattled the bar through its foundations. That was a big turning point as well, because had that have gone in, the momentum would have been with Leeds.
Yeah, the crossbars at Wembley had a big say this weekend. It was opposite ends of the pitch, but obviously Haaland's effort cannoned off the frame of the goal, and that looked for all the world from Dan James as if it was heading in, and you sense if they had scored there so late in the game to take it to extra time with the momentum, with those brilliant fans behind them, it could well have been a different outcome.
Absolutely. In terms of Leeds United going forward, how much money will they have to spend? I suppose, trying to reshape the squad. They've got a lot of players out on loan, really experienced players out on loan actually, that I suppose they'll have to shift on now. Yeah,
because I think a lot of those loan deals, the agreement was that if they were promoted to the Premier League, those players would come back and almost pick up where they left off last season, but clearly that won't happen now.
Yeah, Jack Harrison is one of those. Indeed. He was at Everton this year. Obviously, they've got to come up with a scenario there to try and explicate some of those deals. There's quite a few of them actually. I think Max Verber, who's going to go to the Euros with Austria. Robin Koch, I think, might have been permanently sold, but he's going to be in the Germany squad. Those players all recently have belonged to Leeds United. It's funny how things change so quickly. You said sliding doors moment with the Daniel James thing, but back end of last season, big sliding doors moment for Leeds.
It does, but they've got some great assets. If they do want to cash in and give the manager that money back to go in and try and invest, if you can get a head start early and try and get over this quickly, start to do some business, give the manager a real strong pre-season with some top new players. Again, I think you're going to get the support. There's some wavering from the Leeds fans, and if you can get off to a great start next season, I'd have no worries about them.
Okay, you talked about business. Business opens on June the 14th. Alex Crook is charging his phone from now until then to make sure he can bring you all the transfer updates. I think it's going to be really busy at the start and really busy at the end, and not so much in the middle. Explain to listeners why that might be the case.
Well, first and foremost, I might go and lie in a darkened room until June the 14th, but you're right.
Don't take that bottle of single malt with you.
There's none left. But I think you're right, because the PSR period ends at the end of June, and we know there are a lot of clubs who are under big pressure, that they're really on the tightrope, if you like, when it comes to the Premier League spending rules. So they're going to have to sell players between June the 14th and the end of June, because then it resets and starts all again as the rain starts to fall. So I think there will be some business done in those first couple of weeks. Then, of course, we've got a major tournament, so a lot of players who could be on the move will be over in Germany, and that won't happen until after the championships. Then there'll be post-tournament holidays. So I think you're right. I think first 2 weeks in June busy, and then it will get busy as we move into August as well.
And managerial appointments, because Chelsea need a new boss. United we don't know about yet, but Brighton need a new boss at this moment in time. It could be that Ipswich need a new boss and Leicester need a new boss as well. When do those decisions start getting made? Because pre-season comes around really quickly.
Well, I think Chelsea want their new man in place by the end of next week.
Right.
So they're clearly not
wasting
wasting
any time.
any
Who's that going to be? Enzo Maresca?
The vibes seem to be positive towards De Zerbi as we record this on Sunday, which is interesting, because I wasn't convinced that necessarily he would buy into the Chelsea project. He certainly wouldn't welcome some of the interference that I know Pochettino found hard to deal with from the owners.
He's not going to have Begdad Agbali on the touchline at training sessions, is he? Roberto De Zerbi. That's like volcanic relationship 101.
It will be interesting to see how that dynamic works if that is the case. You mentioned Kieran McKenna. I think he will move on one way or another. I still think he'll probably end up at Brighton. Ipswich, I know, are already sounding out possible replacements. I think they're looking for a young British coach to go in and lead them into the Premier League. So it's going to be a real merry-go-round the next couple of weeks.
And what are players doing now? Players have just finished their season. What's the next on the agenda? What's the next 4 weeks look like?
Class, to be honest. I mean, you'll have already had it planned. So literally the minute the season finishes, the private jet's on the tarmac waiting.
Okay, so tonight there'll be people jetting off, right?
Absolutely. They'll be ready. Hotels booked, pool beds at the ready at Pool Park. I mean, I just wish I could do it all again.
Well, you did enough of it in Qatar.
I was going to say. Well, we wish we could do it all again with you. We probably will do before the end of the Euros. Thank you very much for joining us. The rain started to come down, so we'll pull the curtain down on Premier League All Access. We'll be back for the Euros daily over the course of the European Championships. Euros All Access with Alex Crook and I starts at the beginning of the tournament, so we'll probably do one just before the tournament. I think we've got a big preview coming your way very shortly, and then we'll be giving a big build-up throughout the course of the tournament itself. We look forward to it. Thanks for joining us. Congratulations to Southampton and to Manchester United, the big winners at Wembley this weekend.